as an instrumentalist, it kind of came natural to do that one side, where you're like arranging and creating this sound and figuring out what parts go together. But when I first started writing, a lot of the lyrics were really off the cuff, and I probably didn't give them as much time or consideration as they deserved. And sometimes I just got lucky, I think.
Welcome to episode 131 of the Bass Shed Podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. What's up, everybody? Thanks for listening to the Bass Shed Podcast. Please make sure to subscribe to the Bass Shed Podcast wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. Get notified about new episodes that come out each week. I got some news for you. On October 26th, the Bass Shed Academy is presenting a Latin music workshop with bassist and producer Oscar Cartaya. Oscar will speak about bass player-specific topics like sound production, feel, locking in with the clave, bass gear, but he'll also be talking about Latin music in a much broader sense. I know it's important to Oscar to make sure that the workshop is applicable to all musicians. The workshop will be live streamed and published on the BassShedAcademy.org for later viewing for those who cannot attend live. Proceeds from the Latin Music Workshop support Global Arts Corporation. The Global Arts Corporation is a nonprofit organization that builds sustainable relationships through music and supports music education for lower income communities. I will have a link to the workshop in the show notes below. Sign up for the Latin Music Workshop to take your playing to the next level and make a difference in the lives of young musicians. Also coming at you from the Bass Shed Academy in November 2024, we have two events with Barry Green. Barry Green served as the principal bassist for the Cincinnati Symphony for over 28 years and more recently the principal bassist of the California Symphony and the Sun Valley, Idaho Summer Symphony. Barry Green is author of the double play book, The Inner Game of Music with W. Timothy Galway. The book addresses musicians reaching their potential in performance and learning and has sold over 250,000 copies worldwide. I read it several years ago and absolutely loved it. We'll be doing a workshop at the Los Angeles College of Music on Thursday, November 21st that is focused on the topics of the inner game of music. And on November 23rd, we'll be doing an entirely different program that is Barry's Four Elements program that includes multimedia, his wife narrating, Barry performing the music live on solo double bass. So stop by the BassShedAcademy.org and learn more about the events with Barry Green. LemerMusic.com, everything you need for the double bass. Visit LemerMusic.com, shop their inventory of basses, bows, rosin, sheet music, accessories, and if you are in the Southern California area, please set up an appointment to experience the shop for yourself. LemerMusic.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off.
Hi, this is Jerry Jamont. I want to tell you about my upcoming book of bass transcriptions, JJ's Jukebox Volume 1. This is a collection of over 15 of my bass lines in standard notation and tablature. They are accurately done here by Ryan Roberts of the Bass Shed Academy. Each transcription is accompanied by a video where I talk about what was happening during the recording session, how I got involved, and how I approached each song. Stop by the BassShedAcademy.org to learn more about my book of transcriptions, JJ's Jukebox Volume 1, and purchase a signed copy of my memoirs, Make It Happen.
On the episode is Matt Krahula. Matt Krahula is a bass player, multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter, and producer based in Honolulu, Hawaii. He plays bass for Grammy Nominated artist Henry Kapono, leads the Nightmare River Band, and forms half of the chamber folk duo Beyond Hope with Sierra Noble. After years in the New York City music scene, Krahula moved to Waikiki in 2018 and quickly became a sought-after artist in Hawaii, performing at the top venues and opening for major acts. Krahula started his musical career at the Purchase Conservatory of Music, earning a bachelor's degree in classical music performance on the double bass. His work has been featured on shows like 911 and American Pickers and nominated for an Independent Music Award. I had a great time talking with Matt. We talk about some new music that was released. We talk about his transition from New York to Hawaii and a lot more. And here it is. Here's my talk with bass player, multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter, and producer Matt Krahula. You're in Hawaii right now, correct? Right?
I am, yeah. I live in Oahu.
Okay. Now you moved there from New York. You're originally from Hawaii and then moved to New York for a little while and then came back to Hawaii, correct?
No, I actually grew up in New York, and
Oh, okay.
I moved to Hawaii about 6 years ago.
Okay. What was the reason for the shift?
Man, I was doing the New York kind of grind for like
Yeah.
close to maybe like 18 years, and
Oof.
I just needed like a change of pace for a little while. So
Right.
it sounds kind of silly, but I had always wanted to live on an island. I was like, and I was
Other than Manhattan or Long Island?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
something that had like just like a different vibe. And I was looking into like since I was East Coast, I looked first at like the Caribbean, and I was like, there wasn't really a lot of music opportunity there. And then I ended up getting like an email from like a realtor about a property for sale in Hawaii, and I kind of thought, you know, doing that kind of move was just like out of my budget, and like I started seeing all this like these places that I could actually afford that were pretty comparable to what I was doing in New York as far as expenses, and so I just made the
Right, but
jump.
like three times the size.
Uh, about the same size.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, every cost in Hawaii is pretty equivalent to where I was in New York, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty expensive
Okay, I
place.
wouldn't have guessed.
I think like a lot of times like people come here. I didn't have that sticker shock because I was already kind of paying it in
Right.
New York. So it was a pretty easy transition. But I know when I hear people coming from like, places in, if you moved here from maybe Ohio, you might
Right.
say, wow, this is
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, living in Los Angeles, I'm originally from Phoenix, but when I go back to Phoenix and hear about what friends or family members are paying for their mortgages, and I'm like, really? Like I pay three times that, for rent,
Yeah.
and I don't have a three-bedroom house.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's same here.
Yeah, yeah. Um, man, your PR team sent over the information on you. You stay pretty busy. You got your hands in a lot of things.
I do. Yeah. Uh, I spent a lot of time before I moved to Hawaii just doing kind of my own music.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was doing the singer-songwriter thing. Like I had a kind of country alt folk rock band, kind of similar to like the old 97s.
Oh, I love that band. I love
Yeah,
that band. Yeah.
I fell in love with them because so many people were at our shows and saying, you'd probably really like this band, the old 97s. And like everybody kind of assumed they were a major influence of mine. And they
Yeah.
are now, because now I have like, at least like five of their albums downloaded currently. But like at the time I
Now,
had never
when they
heard of
would
them.
bring this up, sorry to interrupt, but when they would bring this up that, they're assuming that the old 97s were an influence, is that because it had, the Americana roots music thing, or was it the writing, this kind of the cheeky, not play on words, but like if you take the song Lonely Holiday by the old 97s, like it's a really upbeat song, but very depressing lyrics. There's always like this juxtaposition in their writing. Were they referencing that in your sound, or were they just the Americana overview?
I have a feeling it was a little bit of both. My
Okay.
writing's pretty quirky. It's kind of got a lot of that same uh maybe sad undertone hidden in like maybe a glossy arrangement.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think they're probably drawing from both sides of that, and then
Okay, great.
being in that Americana genre, kind of.
Sure. And then you're a multi-instrumentalist. What were you playing in when performing your own music? Were you playing guitar and singing, or were you playing the bass and singing?
So I did both over the years. A lot of it depended on kind of what the budget uh, for like different gigs would allot for.
Sure.
So if I was uh, if I had my way, I would be playing rhythm guitar and not really
Okay.
have to focus too much on actually playing, just kind of strumming and
Yeah.
focusing on being a lead singer. And then I love the ability to, if there's a second guitarist, I don't have to always be playing. So, you can just kind of toss your guitar aside for a little while.
Yeah, it
Uh,
frees you up.
but we did some tours as a trio where I played bass and we had one guitarist. And whenever I did that, I just made sure that all three people were like really good singers so that we could have like 3-part harmonies
Sure.
and like kind of fill out the fact that there was a little less instrumentation happening.
Okay. How did I mean I play a lot of jazz music. I don't know if I would say I'm exclusively a jazz musician, but I play a lot of jazz. And when I think of New York, obviously I think of that.
Sure. Yeah.
I think of jazz. I don't think about Americana music when I think of the New York scene. I know that there's a very, very rich singer-songwriter scene in New York. I have some friends that moved here that were really invested on that scene. How did that sound translate when you were in New York?
I think it did pretty well. There is like New York is such like a melting pot in all
Mhm.
aspects. So there's you, you just have to find your like pocket. There were some
Right.
really cool venues that were really leaning towards what we were doing. We had residencies at a bunch of different places throughout the years that were like um, really kind of like pushing for that
Hmm.
sound to be in New
Okay.
York. Um, I know we played at like we did a lot of stuff at the Mercury Lounge, and
Okay.
they were always bringing through like so they had a lot of really great Americana bands touring through, so we could get a lot of really good opening slots there as well, and groups like Legendary Shack Shakers or trying to think who else. The Last Bandoleros was another group that came through there, and they were kind of these kind of like mid-level indie bands that were would like fill up a 400 capacity room.
Okay.
So there was opportunity. And there's like a little bit of overlap with the singer songwriter rooms. We could always kind of fit in there too, even though we were a little louder than they were.
Right. Right. And then I mean, kind of the same question for Honolulu because I don't think about Hawaii having an Americana sound. I think of maybe shame on me for this, but I'm just thinking ukuleles and beach island, steel pan drums. I
Well,
don't think of anything that would resemble the old 97s or Tom Petty or the band America when I think of Hawaii.
yeah, and you're probably not too far off. That's been one of the more difficult struggles here is that most of the most of the music is centered around like an island feel. There's a lot of reggae,
Mhm.
and then I think it's probably a combination of a few factors. But there's a ton of like EDM that tours through here,
Oh,
and I would guess that that's because it's easier for promoters to book like a one man show
right.
than fly, 6-piece band
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and gear and all that stuff. So they do get a lot of EDM. They occasionally get a cool Americana show here. It's like Trampled by Turtles was here recently.
Okay.
Um, trying to think. They do tend to get more like there's a lot of reggae and a lot
Okay.
of there's a type of reggae that happens here that they call Jawaiian,
Okay.
which is like a Hawaiian based reggae.
Is that like I'm assuming that would be like Ja meets Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. So and it's I think it's like a poppier version of like Jamaican reggae. If I was gonna,
Okay.
probably is it's more similar to like the stuff that happens actually in California. That
Yeah.
style, like
Okay.
Common Kings, kind of that.
Yeah.
that
Just
region.
beachy reggae.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
How
that
is oh, go ahead.
it's just like, so finding my avenues, took a little work here, but they do
Mm-hmm.
exist, which is nice.
How is kind of living on the island hindered your outreach, like getting off the island to go do touring? Like if you're on the mainland, you could do something up the East Coast or up the West Coast, or string together some dates. Even if it was super, grassroots, everybody hop in a van. Uh, an island creates a challenge on that.
Yeah, and I guess the answer would be that I paused my tour schedule since I moved here. Really, I've done a few mainland shows. Just when I'm back visiting people, I'll like go out and play a show. But I kind of put that on hold. I for a few years, and I've been working more as a sideman. But I do have a couple like residencies where I play weekly at different bars in Waikiki, and it's interesting because when you're doing these things on the mainland, they don't really want you to like overplay because they don't want you. I always found that they were worried that, oh, you're booked over there on Tuesday, we don't want you for another 2 weeks here. So yeah,
Right.
you had to travel. Whereas here, like the the uh the crowd changes almost daily because of tourism. So the bars, they have a budget and they're like willing to pay, and you just go out and do your thing, and there's a new crowd every night. It's kind of like being on tour, but the crowd is on
Right,
tour.
right. But the crowd
And
changes and
like,
you stay the same. Yeah, like an,
yeah,
an inverted tour.
and like, so you end up with people following you from all different areas, this kind of the same way you would when you're touring, but
Yeah,
without moving around.
yeah. Well, that's cool.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, you got your undergrad in classical double bass, which we'll come back to that in a second. But
sure.
what when was the shift to really focus on the songwriter portion and get out of, playing classical excerpts and studying technique and all the things that goes into playing classical bass? Uh, Songwriting is a much different pursuit.
It is, yeah. And so when I studied at Purchase College,
Hmm.
which is just north of New York City. Um, and I got to study with Tim Cobb, who was like the principal bass player. Now he's the New York Phil. At the time, he was in the Metropolitan Opera.
Okay.
Um, but the when I was there, going into school, I thought, well, if I want to pursue music, the thing I know is upright bass.
Hmm.
So I guess I'll audition at all these schools on upright bass. I didn't really understand that there was other avenues to pursue in music. And when I got to Purchase, they had like a songwriting program. They had a studio. It was called studio composition, where they taught people how to be studio engineers and producers and stuff. And the nice thing about playing bass is that there's not as many bass players as guitar players. So when I was in school, everybody was like looking for bass players for their bands from those
Sure.
other departments, and I ended up playing with a lot of really really cool people that just happened to be um, in school at the same time
Okay.
I was, and as a result, I just started to slowly shift over and realize that was the avenue I enjoyed more about music, was kind of creating something new. Sometimes being in the classical world kind of felt like being in like a 1,000-year-old cover band. Like, you have to do it exactly the same way every time.
Yeah, right.
Uh, I remember doing my it was my junior recital, and I did some of the Bach cello suites, and I did some of like like the Dragonetti Concerto.
Mm-hmm.
But then I took like a chance in this classical world, and I put like drum programming and a beat behind the third piece I did. And like when I had to go through after the recital, you had to go and perform for a jury to make sure you were like competent to move forward. And I remember the violin professor stopped me on that piece about like 30 seconds in. And I was like, yeah, that's like, that was kind of my indication of what that world was willing to accept as far as moving forward.
Sure. And I mean, I feel like, I mean, I know this not only from doing the podcast and having guests on that have spoken to this, but knowing enough about the bass world, I guess, a lot of folks that get into the classical thing for their kind of, to push the boundaries, they get into really avant-garde playing also.
Yeah.
And so there's this like almost kind of duality that exists, which I think is fascinating. The whole time you were studying classical bass, did you feel this duality of like, man, I just want to be creating something new. I want to be telling stories. I want to be creating music that I feel is more personally and culturally relevant instead of this? Was there a struggle with you the whole time to like sit and go through etudes and still, you know, maybe you're checking out Bob Dylan or James Taylor or something and still really wanting to be like, that feeds this. And the Dragonetti isn't, I'm not getting the same payoff there.
You know, it was probably a little of column A and column B, because I do really enjoy classical music. I love listening to it. I love sitting in a bass section and like the horns behind you and like this huge wall of sound, and like, and I really did love just like sitting there and working on excerpts and getting better at like, you know, Mozart 40 or one of, you know, any of the major like bass excerpts that are out there. And I enjoyed being able to do them well and like progressing and like getting feedback and moving forward in that. And I think just at one point, I just kind of realized that the majority of the playing I would get to do in that world wasn't going to be that also. And I had, like, you mentioned some like avant-garde, you know, a lot of people kind of move into that avant-garde thing. There was this really amazing composer in school with me, and he started bringing me around playing upright bass, and he ended up becoming like a pretty well-known electronic musician. This guy, do you know Dan Deacon? Have you heard that name?
No.
He's been on tour with like the Arcade Fire and like some pretty major acts, but I just started, like, he just needed a classical bass player that could read.
Yeah.
And I would show up to his sessions, and he would have some notes, but it would be like, he would have something written that would say like, play something that sounds like a cat, or like, it would say like, he would stand in the front of the room and be like, I'm going to make a noise, and then I want everybody in the orchestra to try to duplicate that noise on their instrument. And it was like these really wacky things, but they were super fun. And and he ended up kind of translating that into his like more electronic indie pop kind of stuff.
Okay.
And he takes all those elements and does them in a really fun way at his shows. But I just like, I remember seeing, like, being invited to do that and thinking, oh, there is like, that's just one more avenue that I can use the tools that I got from learning this instrument at a high level. I can take it and kind of go in a bunch of different directions.
Before we get, before we talk about the different directions that came after that, how did you get involved with the double bass? Like, to go all the way back, was that your very first instrument, or did you start on piano or guitar or trumpet or something?
Yeah, no, I started on double bass. Actually, it was through public school. They offered orchestra in 4th grade.
Yeah.
Or you could wait to start like a band instrument in 5th grade. And and I wanted to be a drummer, but I didn't want to wait till 5th grade. So I I don't know exactly how it came about. I remember them bringing some instruments into the classroom, and they didn't have a double bass, so nobody picked it. And I think the music teacher is a really, really talented musician from the Albany Symphony. He kind of cornered me and was like, "You'd be a good bass player." And I think like he was just like, I got to get somebody to play bass, or we don't have an orchestra. It was one of those things,
Right.
and so then I remember going home and telling my parents that I wanted to play bass, and they were like my sister already played violin, and
Okay.
they were like, "What? Why don't you pick one of the slightly smaller instruments, maybe like the cello?" But I like had my heart set on the bass, and that's how I ended up going from there. And I did a few years, like the first year, I was just studying in school in the like the classes the lessons that they offered through
Right.
public school, and then the teacher called my mom and mentioned to her that I was progressing really quickly. It might be worth me having an actual bass player teaching me instead of he was an oboe player, but he could play like every instrument.
Yeah.
He thought me studying with somebody that really understood bass would be good for me. So then I took lessons with him and with a bass player from the Albany Symphony for the next 10 years or so.
Okay. Now, when you spend that much time dedicated to the bass and studying classical, was it the closest thing you could get to music, but not it? Or did the bass at that time feel like, yeah, this is it. This is my art. This is my creative outlet. When you're spending the 10 years studying with the guy from Albany Symphony, or was there still like this, not like it's so close, but it's not it. But this is what I got right now, so I'm going to ride it out.
I think I just really enjoyed it. I ended up in a really good youth orchestra that operates out of upstate New York, called the Empire State Youth Orchestra, and they had different levels, and you could like move up. And I always really enjoyed kind of friendly competition. So they had like 3 levels of orchestras, and I remember getting into the first one, and a lot of the kids were in like high school, and I had passed the audition, and I was in like 5th grade, and then I just moved up to where I was in the highest one by I think 8th grade. Most of the kids were like seniors in high school, and I kind of liked that competition of like moving forward and just having something to really like work towards. And so I don't think I really thought of it as much more than like this is something I do. This is like a hobby. And I think when I got closer to having to make a decision, like towards the end of high school, like what role is music going to have in my life, that kind of thought was probably the first time I ever thought of it any differently. Like
that's a heavy question. What role is music going to play in my life? Because I mean, not only do I think that like kids are confronted with serious life questions at too young of an age. Like at 18, you have to like, all right, now you're going to go off to this college and be in debt for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
So you better hope you choose the right thing. And most of the people I know, including musicians who got, a lot of academic training, whatever they went to school for, they do not do. They go to school to like get that time period out of the way. And then, maybe like late 20s, early 30s, they figure out like, okay, this is my thing. So I do think that whole system is unfair. But that's a young age to be thinking about that question. Is that actually how you thought of it? Or is that like retroactively, those were the things you were dealing with?
No, I think I actually thought of it that way in the moment, because I was debating. My sister had gone on to, she was at Syracuse University at the time, and she was getting an engineering degree. And, I was pretty good at all the math and science stuff too. And I was debating about whether going down that path, because it seemed like such an obvious road also to having like a successful career
Sure.
and like but I was talking to one of the bass players that I study with. He would do these they were like called sectionals, where they would just be the bass section, and we would work with like a professional bassist. And he was taught. He was like it was the first time there was like a young guy teaching one of these sectionals, and it was just a different vibe, because he was, I was probably 17 and he was probably 23. He was just out of college, and we all really looked up to him, and he was a great bass player. And it kind of, I think he was telling all of us in this sectional, like, you guys are all getting ready to graduate. Any of you could have a real shot at being like really good bass players in the classical world. You're already playing at a high level in this youth orchestra, and the youth orchestra was doing the same programs that a lot of like professional orchestras were doing. And we toured Europe and went all over and played Carnegie Hall and did stuff like that. And
that's great.
It was just like, and so he was really good at he conned me into becoming a bass player. And like, but I fell for it and I love it for it. And I remember staying after one of those and talking to him a little bit about like what the process would be like, we just talked about kind of like what his life was like and as a bass player. And he kind of mentioned something along the lines of like, we got to a point where I realized I was either going to get to play music all the time or probably do something else and get to play it a little bit in my free time, when there was free time. And that didn't seem like something I could settle for. So
right.
I ended up auditioning for like a ton of conservatories. And then I did send in an application to like the engineering school at Syracuse, just in case I changed my mind last minute. But
so you had already gotten into like production and engineering. Hold on, do you mean sound engineering or do you mean like civil engineering?
Like civil engineering.
Okay. Much different. I was thinking recording engineer. Yeah.
No, it was like
you're talking about something else.
Backup, non-musical backup plan.
Sure.
I like got cold feet.
Yeah. Did you send that in? Did you create a safety net?
Yeah, no, I got accepted to their program. But as I started to take all the auditions at a bunch of the different like conservatories, I was getting like acceptance letters, and some of the teachers were calling my house to like try to persuade me to go to this school or that school. And I said, well, it sounds like it's promising to go in that direction.
Right. There's opportunity here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to then we talked about pursuing different avenues, and you're a multi-instrumentalist. You do production work, singer-songwriter, hired gun. You're spinning a lot of plates. What to tie it in first? Do you think the classical studies have conditioned you to pursue a level of excellence that maybe isn't typically found in aspects of the music business that aren't come from that kind of academic background?
Yeah, I think in a few areas, yeah. Especially when I work. One thing is like I grew up playing with a metronome.
Great.
So like a lot of people that weren't studying in that way wouldn't have done that kind of work, and it was just second nature to me. So that I think that comes off a lot in my playing. I don't do anything super flashy, but I'm always in time.
Yeah, right.
Just,
That's half the battle. That's half the battle.
uh, and I think the other thing is there's like a practice mentality with classical music. And I know you said you play a lot of jazz, and I think it actually is in that world quite a bit too, where
Sure.
it's like you like learn the music and you learn it inside out. So for instance, the gig that I play now, I I was given about 8 hours of music when I was taking over for the current
How
like
long
the
did you have to
previous
learn that?
band.
How much time did you have for that?
I think it was around 2 months.
Okay.
So, but it's definitely a no chart gig,
Yeah.
and it's a no set list gig. It's like know these songs because they could come out at any time.
Yeah. I play with a guy like that where you just got to learn. You have to know his whole book because you have no idea where he's going to go. And it's like 240 tunes or something. And
And
he could just call one out. And you're like, what? We haven't played that in 9 months.
yep, and
Yeah.
and that still happens. And sometimes he's a really good guy, so when you
Yeah.
miss something, it's not a big deal. But like uh, we just celebrated his 50th year of making music. So he's
Oh,
put
cool.
out music since 1973. He was on Columbia Records,
Okay.
and like so you can imagine what kind of catalog he has. And
Sure.
so when I was taking over that gig, I really approached it more from like I feel like that's where my classical background came in, where I was like I kind of treated them just like excerpts. I just was like going through
Yeah.
and like trying to memorize these tunes, and I was like uh, really proud that I showed up at the first gig with him. There had been no rehearsals. It was just like right into the frying pan. And like I was there and I had all my notes were on this one little card of paper that I hid like I fastened down under my tuning pedal.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, that's like as close as I can get to no charts.
Yeah.
And,
I think cheat sheets are fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it was, and I do think a lot of that like classical training helped me. Maybe even just the way like it helped kind of develop the way I think about music.
Sure.
Helped me develop a way to remember all those
Hmm.
tunes. If
Right.
that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Um, to get into the singer-songwriter avenue, at the beginning you talked about people thought the old 97s were an influence. Who were the actual influences?
Oh man, my probably my main influences are like Cat Stevens,
Okay.
Neil Young.
Okay.
Um, I really love John Denver. I grew up with like
Okay.
John Denver, just being played like constantly in my house.
Oh wow,
Uh,
okay.
and probably Bob Dylan. Those are probably my main influences. I listen to a lot of those are like kind of from the folksier side. As far as bands, my favorite bands definitely like the Talking Heads,
Okay.
um, and I love the Cars. Uh,
Okay.
so I think probably some kind of combination of all those
All right.
melded into just sounding like along that old 97s.
Yeah. I could see how the old 97s, if that's the input, I can see how guessing the old 97s, once hearing that melding pot,
Yeah,
it makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, Lyrically, do you approach writing tunes um, like when I think of John Denver, I think about writing about nature and stuff. When I think about Neil Young, that's more political at times.
Yeah.
Same with Dylan. What kind of content do you gravitate towards as a lyricist?
I think ends up mostly being pretty autobiographical. Um,
Okay.
like just things that are happening. to me, I try not to make it that obvious, but you know, the record that I'm currently re-releasing, I like put out this album Last Goodbye in 2012, and we're doing an album called Last Goodbye 11, where all
Isn't
these
that a
people.
Buckley tune?
Yeah, he has an album called either Last Goodbye or The Last Goodbye, I think, right?
Right. Or I
Or
thought that was
just
a tune on Grace. Wasn't that like one of the last
Yeah,
songs on Grace?
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah. So I put this album out, and like the album was kind of a combination of just telling the story of saying goodbye to my grandfather, but also at the same time I was in this band that I had been playing with for like 7 years that was also splitting up, and a few of the songs were about like kind of saying goodbye to that part of my life in general. And I think like that in particular was kind of people always asked me what the songs were about. Everybody knew the one that was like, the one was clearly about my grandfather, but the other ones were like, I tried to mask exactly.
Yeah, a little bit more cryptic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People would ask what they were about, and for a long time I wouldn't tell anybody. I would always my mom would ask what a song would be about sometimes, and I would say, well, like, what do you think it's about?
Sure.
You know, it's meant to be something for me, but it's also meant to be something for other people, and it doesn't have to be the same thing.
We'll be back right after this.
The International Society of Bassists, commonly referred to as ISB, is an amazing resource for double bassists. Visit isbworldoffice.com. They support the double bass community in every way, from sheet music to finding a teacher to getting insurance for your bass. They got it all. isbworldoffice.com. Folks, I want to let you know about another fantastic resource for all musicians, The Career Musician. The Career Musician is founded by music director, songwriter, producer, Nomad. At The Career Musician, Nomad covers all aspects of what's involved with being a working professional musician. Stop by thecareermusician.com and subscribe to the Career Musician podcast wherever you get your podcasts. All right, a quick anecdote about my relationship with Nomad from The Career Musician. I've known him for about 10 or 12 years, and I met him when he had put together a band for an artist he was producing out of the UK. The band was pretty ridiculous. It had Kamasi Washington on tenor saxophone, Ryan Porter on trombone, Brandon Coleman on keys, Tony Austin was actually running Pro Tools, Yaji Hamden was on drums, Maya Sykes was a backup singer. It was like ridiculous band. So we do that gig, showcase with that artist. And then years later, we were doing this little kind of club gig here in LA, and Nomad turns around. He's like, "Yeah, guys, let's just warm up with something." And I'm like, "All right, cool. Let's warm up with something." And Nomad just goes into Teen Town, and not the synth part. Like Nomad was playing guitar. That's why I'm doing this. Not the piano part from Teen Town, but he goes into playing the melody of Teen Town on guitar. And I'm like, "Oh, okay. It's like that then, huh? It's like that. Let's do it. Let's warm up with Teen Town." Yeah, both aspects. Like his playing is fantastic. He's got it all covered. And so everything happening at The Career Musician is absolutely fantastic. Again, stop by thecareermusician.com. Get featured on the Bass Shed podcast. That's right here during the middle of the show, you can get your news heard by the bass community. Get your links to all your social media handles, get your website link, all in the show notes. Stop by thebasshed.com and get your own spot right here in the middle of the show on the Bass Shed podcast. Yeah, I mean, I think great songwriters that can tell their story, but it feels like they're telling your story. There's a serious art to that. How have you worked on that? Like, if we go back to your history with the double bass in a classical piece, whether it's an excerpt or whatever, what the goal is to nail this piece of music, not to nail a concept.
Right.
But when in songwriting, if you're going to pursue, telling my story, but making it so relatable that it's everybody's story, that's a concept. How have you positioned from one, shedding something that's tangible, kind of, to something that's not tangible? And then specifically, how did you work on shedding that as a lyricist?
Yeah, so as an instrumentalist, it kind of came natural to do that one side, where you're like arranging and creating this sound and figuring out what parts go together. But when I first started writing, a lot of the lyrics were really off the cuff, and I probably didn't give them as much time or consideration as they deserved. And sometimes I just got lucky, I think.
Yeah.
Like, as time went on, I started, I think a big moment for me was I was working with a singer-songwriter from Canada. Her name's Sierra Noble, and she is like really attentive to detail and lyrics in a way that like she doesn't mind sitting and like figuring out like a line or two. It could be like the whole session, but we would like talk about maybe like one verse or even part of a verse.
Sure.
And I remember when we first started writing together thinking like I would just throw out like 20 lyrics at her,
Yeah.
and she'd be like, well, what do how do those actually relate to the story we're trying to tell? And I would go back later and listen to the ideas, and every time that we sat and contemplated these things, we came out with a much better song than we would have if we had just settled like earlier. And it really made me think about like an approach to lyrics, and like I needed to be dedicating more time to them. And so I just started I just listened to a lot of other people, and I try to, when I'm listening to other music now, I try to dissect like why it works. Sure. Like right now, one of the biggest people that's kind of doing folk music but kind of doing Americana, but it's also pop music, is this guy Noah Kahan. And
Kahan.
He's like, yeah, he's all over the radio right now. He has that Stick Season song, and I like really like my fiance like loves his music, so it was playing in the house, and I was thinking like seeing all these videos of him playing, I'm like, I wonder what like, this is a great song, but like what is it that's drawing people to it, other than like it's catchy, but like there's a lot of catchy songs and people are like really latching on to this more than just in passing. And I just started to like dig through some of his lyrics, and they are like stuff that you can relate to. And it's like he's talking about things that everybody's like gone through, whether it's like, dealing with like the weather in the Northeast for a season where like it can be brutal, or just like losing like, a loved one or a partner. And he's creating like a nostalgia for people. And so I've been trying to go back and like dissect things the way that I might have dissected like the Bach Beret when I was learning years ago. And,
Sure.
So I do.
Did you find some of the what made that work when you're reverse engineering this guy's music, that a lot of it rested in the lyrics or more of it rested in the production? Because when I listen to new music, like things that are on the radio now, very rarely do I find something that I think is amazing lyrically and has killer production. You can say like, okay, that production is ridiculous, like well done. Of course it's going to win all these awards and whatever. But lyrically it's a piece of crap.
Yeah.
And at the top, very high at the list is Happy by Pharrell. I think lyrically that song is just a piece of crap. But the production is flawless.
Yeah, the production's unreal on all that. A lot.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the top 40 stuff is getting produced in such a finely tuned manner that it's like, but I think I think the artists that are a little more crossover that are kind of sneaking in to that area.
And the imposters. Yeah.
Yeah, like Mumford and Sons did it
Sure.
years ago, and a few artists have been able to do it over the years. I think it was a lot more common, like
To have some integrity
pre-2000s.
lyrically.
Yeah. Yeah, but now it almost feels like, occasionally, like the Mumford and Sons example, or the Arcade Fire, or somebody that is both making this something that is still just like this high level of art, but also high level of production, and the lyrics and everything comes together. I think Beck does it really well, and they just can't. They do it for so long that eventually they can't be ignored.
Yeah, right. It's
like he's put out like 10
water drip torture.
Yeah, and like how many records did Beck put out before he like got recognized with the Grammy? It was like unbelievable. But he did eventually, and I think it was like they couldn't deny it after a while. Like, this guy is like serious in every element that he's doing. Right,
and the work as a whole that he's released, like, you have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Getting into still going down different avenues of the things you do, being a producer, do you produce not only your own stuff, but other artists' stuff? You mentioned co-writing. Were you kind of involved with that artist as just a co-write, or were you producing a record or EP?
Yeah, we produced a 2 EPs together, actually, and I have a cabin up in the Adirondack Mountains in New York, and we built out the house as like a studio for a couple of weeks, and just tracked everything, just the two of us, just kind of goofing around and making something that we thought would people would really like. And then we actually never released any of it. I think we're gonna throw it up on like Spotify and stuff just for fun, but it was that particular project was something I think we just both needed to be doing in the moment, just like writing with somebody new, playing music in a way that we weren't used to. I was trying to figure out where things were going with my group, Nightmare River Band, and I think she was having a little bit of a musical identity crisis too. And I think we were just there at a really good time for each other to like work on some music that really there was no pressure on.
Right. It almost sounds like the musical equivalent of like some kind of summer romance. Like, you just,
Exactly.
Both families are on vacation. You kind of just hit it off and you spend the summer together.
Yeah.
No strings attached kind of thing, but everybody needed the interaction.
Yeah. And I think both of us needed to approach music differently. And I think because we had both been approaching it so differently from each other, we were able to share a lot of a different perspective.
Sure.
And I think I know, at least for me, and she's mentioned similar things, but it, in a lot of ways, reignited our like love for music.
Right. Well, I mean, going like dealing with somebody new who's going to appreciate your ideas, there's a sense of validation that occurs there. That's going to be like, oh, right, I'm not glossed over, or like being the idea of feeling recognized, is always going to light somebody up on any level.
And it was kind of a cool moment because I hadn't been playing a lot of upright bass in a while, and we heavily orchestrated the whole thing because she's like a world-renowned fiddle player. Okay. So we ended up like she played like the opening ceremonies for the Vancouver Olympics. Those kind of moments on fiddle.
Okay, when were the Vancouver Olympics?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I remember, like, I love the Olympics. Just in general, I love the Olympics. I remember them being in Vancouver, but I don't remember when that was. Like,
Would it have
08,
been like
010, 2010, I mean?
I think around that area,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
something like that, maybe.
She was kind of a child prodigy, so she was probably like
Okay.
17 or 18 when she did it.
So, but that to me, when I think of fiddle, I think of, because of all the work I did playing country music, I think of like fiddle, like
Yeah.
country fiddle. That seems to me like she's a classical soloist, like more in like a Joshua Bell tradition, like, knows the classical repertoire as a soloist, and is forwarding that tradition. So
So
when you
she
say fiddle, what's her vibe?
No, she's more like legit like country style fiddle, like
Okay.
old timey fiddle. Um, and she does this style, and I hope I don't get it too mixed up because I'm not an expert on that
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
believe in Canada there's like a different style of fiddle coming from different regions of
Oh,
Canada. And she studies
okay.
this like it's like a Métis style, which I think Métis, and I like I said, I'll feel bad if I get this wrong, but I think it has something to do with having some native, like American native Canadian blood makes
Okay.
you part of this Métis tribe. But the style of fiddling that I think that's associated with it is that style where they kind of sit and also clog with their feet. So they do like rhythms with these like kind of tap shoes
Oh,
and accompany themselves.
wow.
Yeah,
So
it's
there's
really
kind of
cool.
almost like this river dance element
Yeah,
to comp for yourself while you're
yeah.
playing on top of it.
She's probably gonna
Wow.
see this and she's gonna text me and be like, "You got that? That was like 70% correct."
Yeah, yeah. And then everything Ryan said, 0% correct. Like not Irish at all. What's that idiot talking about?
But she can. She's like, yeah, she can play any style.
Okay.
But I think a big part of the project we were doing is because she was coming so heavily from the fiddle world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it had been a long time since anyone had asked her to play string parts.
Right.
Like orchestrated stuff,
Right.
and um, I think it was a moment where like we did it, and I mean, I knew she was going to be awesome at it, but I don't know if she did, and
Yeah.
realized like, wow, like this is awesome, and I feel like there was this new avenue for her with her instrument when we left.
As being more of a section player and layering and doing kind of more of a
Yeah,
recording
like
thing.
pads and like
Yeah.
swells, and the like more. We kind of made an album that I would probably call like a chamber folk, chamber pop, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So then what's the what's the leading instrumental voice on that?
We both sing, so it's male
Okay.
female counterpart.
Like acoustic guitar driven, piano driven.
Mostly acoustic guitar. Yeah,
Okay.
instrumentation on it was on the record was a lot of acoustic guitar, fiddle, then like more traditional violin playing, upright bass, and we had a drum kit, but we tried to treat it more like a orchestral section. So like when I tracked drums, I didn't have any of the like cymbals or hi hats up. It
Hmm.
was all just kick, floor tom, and snare, and then we overdubbed just like cymbal swells and stuff later,
Yeah. I
and
think that
tried to just
I've never heard of that happening until I was fortunate enough one time to sit in on a recording session with the drummer Steve Gadd, and 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 I he worked out his part, to the thing, and then he's like, "All right, guys, let's hit it," and he tracked the whole thing with no cymbals, and he just drums, and then
yeah.
there might have been hi hat, I can't really remember, but no cymbal work at all, and then went back in and did cymbals, and that was mind blowing to me. I've never thought even out of all the records I had already done, that was a thing.
Yeah.
I had never. That was amazing to me at the time.
Well, it probably solved a lot of problems for us in the long run too, because like, I mean, I'm not a great drummer. That's like not really what I do. But
If you're doing editing and stuff like that, yeah, yeah,
yeah. So it was like it made everything a little easier for me to play,
mm-hmm.
and then also easier to like isolate later.
Right.
So
Yeah. So what were the names of those projects and when?
So the name of that project is Beyond Hope.
Okay.
We recorded the records in a small town in Wells, New York.
Mm-hmm.
The town, right? The next town over that you drive through before you get there is called Hope. So
okay. Okay. Yeah, because that title could go a couple different, could also be like some Hallmark movie around Christmas time. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was location-based title.
Okay. What other recording projects have you been a part of?
So one of the main people I play with here in Hawaii is his name is Henry Kapono,
mm-hmm.
and he had a group called Cecilio and Kapono that goes back to the 70s, and they did their first 3 records on Columbia Records, and he eventually decided he was like kind of didn't want to be on the road all the time, and he came back to Hawaii and made this amazing career, mostly staying in the islands, but he still tours. I mean, we're going to the Coach House, I think, in October and playing a show.
Down in Orange County, that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Coach House, Stagecoach,
San Juan Capistrano.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
So
I teach at a bass shop right there, like super close to that place.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, shoot me an email when you're in town.
I will. Yeah,
link
that
up
would
down
be
there.
awesome.
Cool.
That sounds great. Yeah, so I've pretty much been playing bass on everything that he's been putting out since I got here and took over that job. And he put out a really great record called Henry's House that was like just kind of it was a little bit about just getting back to simpler times during COVID. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have any COVID references, but it was just like, man, wouldn't it be nice if we could just be like back at the beach playing these tunes, or like,
sure.
And I resonated with a lot of people really well. He's written songs with so many different legendary musicians. Like he's collaborated with like Michael McDonald, and Jimmy Buffett, and like we recently did a Maui benefit where Mick Fleetwood was on the bill too.
Oh, sweet.
And so I've done a bunch of recording with him, both on upright bass and electric bass. And there's a really great producer that lives here in Hawaii, this guy Daniel Gilad, and he hires me pretty much on everything he's working on at this point. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying I'm his like house bass player, but
if he's hiring you on like at least 70% of the material, like you're in the house of bass players, right? If you're not the house bass player, you're in the house. Yeah,
and he's a great producer and he's a great friend, and so I do a lot of work through him. I've recently done some classical music through a good friend of mine in, I say classical, but more film score stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine from college that also we toured together in a band called Fireflies. His name's Dan Romer, and he does like a lot of like film score stuff. He did Pixar's Luca.
Okay.
And he recently did a show called Station 11, so I played a lot of the bass on that.
Is he live in Hawaii or is he out here on the West Coast?
He's in LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So he'll send tracks when he needs upright bass sometimes.
What's your home rig for recording?
So I have a couple different things depending on what I'm using or what I like to throw my bass through the Acme DI, the Motown DI. So it's all the electronics they rebuilt from like the old Acme studios.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that DI. I've never played through one. Have you ever A-B'd the Acme DI versus a Countryman DI? Because the Countryman DIs are amazing for bass.
Countryman's really nice, yeah. I haven't A-B'd them, but I have never had any complaints about them either. They're fantastic. I also like the red DI for bass, yeah.
Yeah.
So I usually use some combination of that. I use Focusrite, the ISAs, too, for some different stuff. And then I have I use some of the Warm Audio compressors. I have their like LA2A clone.
You know, I was just talking to the guitar player that's on this gig I'm doing. He mentioned that he's a super like vintage mic nerd, you know, to use his words. And I brought it up. I'm like, man, have you ever used, not that these are vintage mics, but like, have you ever used any of the Warm Audio stuff? Because they sell like 87s and 67s, 47s, all the knockoffs, at like a budget you can swing, you know?
Yeah.
He's like, no, I haven't. Have you ever checked out any of the Warm Audio mics?
I've never used their mics. I have their just the two compressors, the LA2A and it's the 1176, is it?
Yeah.
So I have those in like a signal chain. Those are nice on vocals too.
Okay.
And then what else do I got? That's pretty much all I'm using right now.
Yeah,
I have a bunch of stuff in storage in New York because I didn't move everything here
Is that all still up in the cabin, in the Beyond Hope cabin?
No, so that cabin is like an Airbnb right now
nice. Make money off it. Yeah.
It's a lot of it's at my parents' house.
Okay.
I have a lot of nice gear there. I have my Bergantino cabinet is there.
Nice.
And I've got like orange.
Well, I love Bergantinos. I used to have a 210. My favorite. I love them. I don't have one now. I'm not endorsed by anybody cab-wise, but I love the Epiphany. That being said, what Bergantino and what was it like schlepping that around New York? Because if I lived in New York, I would have just the GK 112 combo, throw it in something I can put on my shoulder, and if I'm riding in a cab or a subway, I'm not taking anything bigger than that.
So I bought it when I was like, a young guy, thinking like, I'm going to show
big rigs are better.
Rig. And it's the 212.
Okay.
So it's big and it's heavy.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the best sounding cabinets on the market, but
I wouldn't doubt that at all. And I would never doubt the sound. I don't deal with big cabs because I don't want to lug that.
After a couple of years of like lugging it around from maybe age 20 to 22, maybe 21 to 23 area. Because I was using the 200 tube head too, which is like weighs a ton.
Yeah,
and
you're a glutton for punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I remember we did a tour with that, and I remember getting home from the tour and like the wheel caster was coming off like the whole time, and like you're trying to wheel it around with three wheels and get the other
like
one.
The gimpy shopping cart.
Yeah. And like I just said, oh, I think I've had enough of that. And then you become, after you just really subject yourself to that, it's really easy to become the guy that's like, oh, what do they have at the club tonight? Oh, yeah. Oh, it's like one speaker that's like kind of not attached, but like they say it buzzes, but it'll probably work. Yeah, that'll be fine.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Some PV 115 cab with the blown speaker, like that's amazing. I'll take it.
it
Yeah,
sounds great. Yeah.
yeah.
And so I like, and it's funny you made that joke because I have that the 110 speaker by Galley and Kruger.
Oh,
No,
yeah. The GK MB 150. Yeah.
And I bought that, and it fits in that like looks like a little mail cart.
Mm-hmm.
And I wheeled that around for the next like 5 years in New York.
Oh yeah, man! I had one that I used as like my main amp for probably about 5 years. Like if the gig was awesome. Bigger, like boom, just DI right out of the head.
Exactly.
The only issue is like you're not moving a lot of air, you know.
No.
So if you have to play a bigger room, whatever, there's that. But those things are amazing. But mine was breaking down all the time. Like every 2 months, it was back in the shop for something.
Yeah,
but I love the amp.
I had a lot of. I love the orange head, but the type of touring I was doing, where it was just getting thrown in and out of a van. It's not that kind of amp, and
well, especially with tubes, doing that kind of touring. Yeah,
and in the winter, you're going in and out of the different temperatures and stuff after it's been heating up all night. You know, like
sure.
And like the interesting thing, because we're talking amps, this blew my mind when I started playing in Hawaii. Like nobody's using amps here. Everybody goes DI.
Really?
And a lot of it is because I think a lot of the gigs are like hotel gigs, and they don't want amps like overpowering.
They don't want the look of sound. Is like that. They don't want it to look like it's gonna be loud.
I think I think there's probably a non-musician making the decision.
Of course.
And thinking like if that's there, it's going to be loud. But also you do get a lot of people that get into those amp battles where the bass player turns up and the guitarist turns up, and then the sound guy has no control. Right. So like my main gigs, I actually show up with just a little DI. It's called Le Bass.
It's called what?
Le Bass, like LE bass.
Okay.
And it's a tube DI, and it's got like a clean sound and like overdriven sound, and then you can fuse the two together, and it's like
overdriven, like a B15 kind of grit, or like a fuzz.
I wouldn't more grit than fuzz.
Okay.
Yeah, I bet you could probably push it harder. I use it as like a lead tone, like if any, like in the few moments where that's necessary. It stays on clean sound like 99% of the time.
Sure. Yeah, I remember talking to the guys at Trickfish years ago, and I was over at one of the dudes' places, and we were talking about just bass gear. I'm like, man, why does everything have fuzz on it? Like, why does everything have fuzz? Like, why are they just forcing fuzz on all bass players all the time? It's a little obnoxious. There's never been a scenario ever in my career where I'm like, man, I wish I had fuzz. You know, like this musical moment calls for fuzz so bad that I wish it was built right into my rig. Never ever thought that. I think of that about most effects actually, but
I feel the same. I like the one thing that it does when you're on the like higher gain stage is it sustains really nice.
That's true. Yeah.
So like I said, it's like a very few moments where I need it too. It's and I don't really need it. It just is like really just to stand out a little. If there's like a feature moment.
If you didn't have it, would you go out, like if you didn't have it built into the rig, on this DI, would you go out and get it? Or would you just live without it?
I would live without it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what my thoughts are about fuzz. Like, okay, I'm not going to go make an effort to order it or, A/B fuzz pedals or, watch some kind of shootout on the fuzz forum.
I have a big muff pedal that hasn't really left the drawer in years, and It was like, it was there when I got this pedal that was like, really, I just wanted an option to make it so I had some control over my tone since everything was going DI.
Right.
And like, but to your question, like, yeah, that fuzz pedal was there for a long time, not going to that gig.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Like,
right. You even had the option and you didn't take it.
Yeah, it stayed home and I went. You know.
Yeah,
like,
right. You don't want to let your friends know you own a fuzz pedal. It's like riding a Vespa. It's all cool till the homies find out. What do you got coming up?
So the big thing I'm doing is I'm releasing this album Last Goodbye 11, which is I reached out to a ton of my musician friends and asked them each to reimagine a version of one of my songs from the original Last Goodbye album.
Oh, wow.
To celebrate it. So it was supposed to be Last Goodbye 10. So I want to celebrate the 10-year anniversary, but I asked all my creative friends to get together and do it. So, took an extra year. So it's Last Goodbye 11.
Yeah, right.
And actually we're bordering in the 12.
Man, you can run like an Ocean's 13 thing on this. Just every year, pump out a new version.
Exactly.
Open it up to everybody online. Like, hey, if you're interested, we're doing Last Goodbye 29. You want in on this?
Exactly. And that's been like the main thing I've been kind of promoting these days. The publicist that reached out to you, Heidi, she's working that angle. I gave her an interesting project. I'm sure it creates a lot of headaches on the PR side because it's 11 different artists, sure, each doing a song. So, kind of crafting a story around 11 artists that aren't even all in the same genre. It's like.
So how does this? So you pick 11. You pick the friends to reimagine the material. What if you don't like it? What if you think like, that's how much? Well, I got so many questions about this actually. One, that's number one. What if you don't like it? Two, how much freedom does the new creative source have in reimagining? All right, are you just going to be like, okay, that's what you did? There we go. We're going right from oven to dinner table. Or is there a reworking process in the middle?
So I guess looking back, I got lucky because that didn't happen. There was no scenario where somebody sent me something and I was like, well, this isn't what I was hoping for. Like, I didn't reach out.
I was really hoping you'd put fuzz on it. Really? How come there's no fuzz on your rendition?
I just reamped all the basses.
Yeah.
At my studio, added right through my fuzz DI.
Perfect.
No, I didn't really worry about it ahead of time either. I guess now if I did it again, I probably would, now that you've asked the question. But I asked people like Last Goodbye 29, I'm going to be in a pure panic about now.
Yeah. Right. We all know who's not getting the call for that one. Like, I'm definitely not getting the call to reimagine anything.
So I tried to I reached out to people that I was confident would understand what I was looking for. And I was also open to the idea that I might not get exactly what I was expecting, but I'm choosing people that have a track record of doing things that I like.
Yeah. You trust their intuition and artistry.
And also I think it turned out I really enjoyed everybody's take on the songs, and it was really fun. Every time I got one, I was like, this is awesome. Like this, like just hearing somebody else doing my music was really rewarding to begin with.
Yeah.
But then hearing like these people that I've believed in for so long, and they're all in various stages of their careers too. And and I think I just had to be open to the idea that if something came in that I wasn't like my vision, didn't mean it wasn't good, that it's all pretty subjective.
Right.
It didn't really cross that like didn't happen. So I lucked out, and I stayed, to answer your other question, I stayed very uninvolved. So the idea came from Henry, the guy I play bass for here. He put out a record celebrating the songs of C&K, that band that was on Columbia. And he had a younger generation of artists all come in and reimagine songs from the C&K days. And he kind of duetted on a lot of them, or sang or contributed something. I actually wasn't in the band back then, so I don't know exactly how the recording process went, but I joined shortly after and heard that record was on the radio here a lot. And it kind of sparked the idea to go do this. But then I was like, man, well, I want this guy to contribute. He's in New York. This guy's in Louisville. This guy's in LA. I can't really afford to just be going around the world or to even bring everybody here. So why don't I will just give them complete creative license. So I just said, like, let me know if you have to go into like a studio to track anything, let me know, and I'll cover the expenses, and we'll find a room for you to work in. A lot of them just have rigs like me at home and could do the majority of it on their own. I stayed really uninvolved. So I would say out of the 11 artists, maybe 2 of them sent me a working idea before the final one, like before the final project. And I only played on one song just because my friend was orchestrating his piece and he wanted upright bass, and the goal was for me to not really be involved in the creative process. I created the first version, so I didn't want my thoughts on what they should sound like going into the new version. So he sent me sheet music, and I just tracked what he wrote and sent it back, so we wouldn't have to hire an upright bass player to like do exactly what I could do.
Right. Exactly. Oh man, this has been great, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this is a blast.
Yo, this is Craig Gash. Subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the Instagram, the YouTube. Leave us a comment.
All right. That was my chat with Matt Krahula. Make sure to stop by his website, krahula.com, to check out more information, performance dates, videos, and music by Matt. Krahula.com. I think that's pretty killing, right? That's pretty killing that his last name's so unique. He could just do the lastname.com. Like, I can't get away with just roberts.com. That's pretty happening. Folks, that's about all I got for this one. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for chiming into the Bass Shed podcast. And I will catch you on the next one in a minute.